You're listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. This is the show that talks about identity and access management and making sure you know who has access to what. Let's get started. Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Good. Excited to do a Jim and Jeff episode. It's been a little while. I mean,
it has been.
We've gotten into the mode. We do the live stream together every week. I think the feedback's been pretty good, but we haven't done a Jim and Jeff episode for the audio only world. Maybe we should remind everyone that we do a live stream each week on YouTube. So you get to kind of see our mugs.
Unfortunately for people, but yeah. Oh well.
Yeah. But you also get hopefully a little bit of good conversation along with that. I think it's a good conversation anyway. And yeah, I mean, it's always fun to do the Jim and Jeff episodes. It brings you back to the early days of Identity at the Center.
Yeah, sitting in my very echoey and still very echoey office with a less than ideal microphone, not knowing what the heck to do from an audio editing engineering perspective. And now here we are. Let's see, almost 3 years later. We'll be celebrating our birthday in July, our third birthday.
Wow. You know, I think that the crazy thing is, like, yes, we started off there, but I think you could literally start a consulting side gig just helping people start their podcasts. Because I think, you know, we've talked to so many people who said, I'm going to start a podcast. And I don't think folks realize what it takes to put out a quality podcast.
Yeah, not that this show is any judge of quality, that's for sure. But there is certainly a lot to it. I'm great at giving advice. As long as I don't have to do it, that's even better. So I would be in favor of that.
Well, like you've said, I mean, that's what advisory. So for everybody who doesn't know what we do during the day, it's advisory. It's a fancy way of saying we get paid to give advice. And Jeff also often calls it the best paid job in consulting. Right? Did I get that right?
I think it's the best job. I don't know if it's the best paid, but I think it's the sweetest gig. You know, you're basically paid for an opinion and leaning on your, decades of experiences in some cases to steer people in the right direction. I enjoy it. I think it allows us to have really interesting conversations. As much as, a lot of organizations struggle with similar trends, nobody is ever perfect or identical to another customer or another client, and they have their own unique challenges. So as always, it comes down to the details when we're trying to develop strategies or assessments or whatever it may be, is what makes sense for them, right? And not just broadly speaking, painting across any number of things. Sure, there's going to be some, challenges that everyone struggles with. We don't do a good job of tracking non-employees. Okay, well, yeah, join the rest of the club. Is it getting better? At a macro level, yeah, I think so. But there's still plenty of companies that struggle with it. So, okay, how do we navigate around that? And, what are some things that we've seen that works, some that we know for sure don't, or some that might, but you need to really consider, what are some of the second or third order effects that might result out of that. So that's why I like it. I think it's opinion-based, it's experience-based, and it gives us an opportunity to have some pretty interesting conversations with a wide variety of people.
So we've always said there's the two holy wars in IAM. One is where to put non-employees, and the other is how to use your ITSM system relative to your identity administration. And I just feel like as long as those have been the holy wars, it's surprising that it's not like a black and white solution out there now where it's like, this is what you do and everybody agrees on it.
Yeah. I guess good for us from being able to solve some of the same problems over and over again. At some point, those will probably be like, look back in the past and be like, oh, I can't believe the Neanderthals back in the early, 2000s or, whatever it was like, this is how we used to do identity. And, next up is, metaverse and how are we going to handle identities in that space and, whatever it looks like in the future. Can you imagine now once we start having, so we've got human, we've got non-human, right? Silicon based, what happens when the aliens arrive and they start needing access to systems, assuming they politely ask and say, hey, can we federate into your corporate Active Directory environment? whatever that looks like in the future. How are we going to classify those identities?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this metaverse idea a lot of times, and I think there's a ton of application in business, especially since everything happened with COVID, and we're all now getting more used to interacting in this way where we look at each other on a video camera. Wouldn't it just make much more sense to either do a virtual reality or augmented reality where we're all sitting in the same room and it kind of just feels like we're having this conversation, but we're sitting across from one another rather than looking at a two-dimensional version of each other over a computer screen?
Yeah, I see the benefits of it. I think the novelty of it is still relatively cool. I have been fortunate enough to try out more than a handful of VR type interfaces, Oculus, HTC, and a few others that really never made it. The idea of sitting in a virtual room is interesting, and there are certainly applications out there that take advantage of that interface. There's one I'm thinking of where you can basically watch content in a public situation. You're not all in the same physical location, but you're on the same virtual location. The problem for me is that the visual fidelity is just not there yet, and there is certainly, you're not, in a real place. So that illusion of reality is not quite there yet. Again, concept is cool. We'll see how it pans out in the future. I think some people like sitting, at their computers and not necessarily having to go into a physical space anymore. And this could be an interesting, medium space where people don't want to maybe go back in the office, but they do miss some of that interaction. Is it going to be the same? No, but if you had a high quality, 3D avatar of whatever projection that you want to put up there, now we're really talking about the Matrix. Maybe that's interesting for some folks. I don't know. I feel like I've been in the metaverse for a long time just by playing video games, pretty much my entire life, and doing massively multiplayer games, things like World of Warcraft and Destiny and all these other analogs for fancy chat rooms with 3D interfaces. So I'm in. I'm happy to try it. I don't know if it'll necessarily take off in the business world, especially not until the price comes down, the usability becomes more improved, becomes more comfortable to wear, right? Those sorts of things.
I think those are important things. So if Steve Jobs was still alive, would he have, would this be the thing that he dives into to make virtual reality? So I threw out there the business case, but, think of how many people didn't get together over the holidays during COVID. And with, air travel being expensive and travel in general being expensive, people being more and more distributed from each other, you have the family reunion in a virtual setting, right? Hey, join the family reunion. Just put, everybody's got a headset, put it on. We'll all get together. Same with conferences, same with other meetings. You don't have to leave your house, and you can really feel like you are together. And I know it sounds like babble, and if you haven't tried the virtual reality, it's kind of, in my experience, like if you haven't tried a Tesla. Like I've talked to people who are just like, they don't look that great. They can't be that great. I'm like, have you ever driven one? And I've only driven one once, but it was so much different than driving a normal car. I was like, I didn't think it was that different until I drove one. When you drive one, you will know the difference. It's not the same. So anyway, if Steve Jobs was alive, what would he do?
I don't know what he would do, but I know Apple is allegedly trying to get into the VR or maybe augmented reality AR space. They're already kind of doing with some of the phone apps that are taking advantage of the technology in phones these days. So I think, there's this idea of Apple Glass or something along those lines where it'll be some sort of VR, AR thing. I'm sure when it comes along, it'll be interesting. Whether or not the world is ready for it is always a question mark. But I don't know. I think if there's a company that could execute it in a mass market fashion that makes it available and usable to the mass market, it's probably a company like Apple, given their history of getting things out into the market like Face ID, biometrics, Touch ID, biometrics, right? Things like that. Your grandma is using Face ID and Touch ID, without too many problems at this point. If we can overcome the usability challenges that VR brings with it, I would give it to them. I think Oculus, which is a company that Facebook, now Meta, picked up, they were certainly in the forefront of that as well. I think there is certainly, they've released now several versions of Oculus Rift and Quest and all these other types of headsets. So it could be interesting on that and see how they do as well.
So I guess where I was going with the whole Tesla analogy is really that, if you ever try the virtual reality headset, so a lot more real than I thought it was going to be. So I'm kind of becoming a believer. I really think it could become part of our business and life reality, but I know we're getting way off track from what this show is really all about, identity and access management.
I love it, but yeah, just a bit.
Yeah, let's circle back to this topic at some point, but maybe we'll bring somebody in who can bring the perspective of, the relationship between identity management and the metaverse.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. So, yeah, why don't we pivot to actual identity and access management talk? We actually had a question from one of our listeners. I'm going to protect, because I wasn't sure if we were able to use full names and things like that. So we'll just leave it anonymous. This is from Matt G, somewhere in the United States. Hi, Jeff and Jim. I'm just getting into IAM consulting and had a question about IAM strategy and programs. Specifically, when and where should the focus be on strategic versus tactical when developing an overall identity strategy? How does that differ from an IAM program? So I think there's a few different questions there. And Matt, thank you so much for reaching out. We're always happy to take content like this and try to turn it into an answer, hopefully, that you'll get some use out of. But maybe we can start to break it down. Really, kind of the first question is the difference between an IAM program versus a strategy. Do you want to take a crack at that, Jim?
Yeah. So, well, first thing I think is the context of how you use the term program. And I think it's more holistic than a project. So usually people contrast program and project, and a program is, a lot of context. It's a set of projects that have something to do with each other. But more commonly, when we talk about IAM, we're talking about the plan, build, and run of IAM. So the run is really the operations, how you execute identity and access management on a day-to-day basis. How do people come onto the organization, ensuring that you have the right access for the right people to the right resources, that you're authenticating them. It's not just people, also includes things now. I mean, that's, an identity is more than just people. It could also be an identity of things, which could include software. It could include hardware that, has software running on it, of course.
Your VR headset.
It could be your VR headset. It could be a machine that, manages the temperature in your building. It could be a door lock. It could be all kinds of different things. It could be an identity. Anyway, but back to what an IAM program is, it's running the operations of managing all that. It's building improvements, enhancements, maybe new technology to do a better job at managing identity. And then it's the planning, which is both the strategy as well as, making determinations on what you're going to build and how you're going to change how you run IAM. So I think that plan, build, run model is very effective to apply to an IAM program. And as you can see, when you talk about a project's typically going to be one track, and it's usually in that build area where you are enhancing technology, and it's a finite project. It has a beginning, it has an end. You're going to set a scope, and you're going to have a deliverable, an outcome that you're pursuing, and a project is going to have tasks that need to be performed. You're going to have to track those tasks. You're going to perform those tasks. You're going to have to test them. And then you're going to go live. And then the project comes to an end. However, the program continues on in perpetuity.
Yeah, the way I think about it is it's at the very top level, you've got the strategy. Beneath that, you've got the program. Then beneath that program, you've got a bunch of different projects. If you want to like take the org hierarchy type approach to at least the way that I kind of think about it. So I think hopefully that covers that. And I think now the next question is when and where should the focus be on strategic versus tactical when you're developing a strategy, which is definitely something that you can certainly get stuck in a quagmire of minutia and detail, especially when you're trying to figure out strategy. A lot of times it might raise up in the form of, well, we have these 300 applications and we need to figure out how all three of these 100 applications authenticate and authorize, and all of a sudden it becomes, oh my gosh, this is never going to get done. Right. From my perspective, I'm looking at it more from a pattern. I don't want to have 300 ways to integrate applications into my IAM program. I would want to have 2, maybe 3, and they should be standards based. If an app isn't using SAML or OIDC, right, that's one hitch point. Maybe another one might be Active Directory or some sort of LDAP that is central to the organization. And then if it's not one of those 2 things, why not? What are we doing to modernize the authentication or authorization for some of these disconnected apps that aren't leveraging more of a central store for that? So that's an area where I can certainly see people getting stuck in the minutia, and that's definitely tactical. The strategy is, okay, how are we going to pull those apps into a common integration framework rather than trying to figure it out a bunch of different ways? What are your thoughts on that one, Jim?
Yeah, I think that actually you pulled out a great example there with the strategy being we're going to have integration patterns, and maybe there's an exception process, right? Maybe there are applications that don't fit one of those patterns. So be it. We'll, have to come up with how we handle that. But the tactical is really, it's important too. It's the projects to take those 300 applications and apply an integration pattern to it. All those things need to happen in order to achieve success. But the game plan, the project plan for, taking on those 300 applications, that's not part of your strategy. Your strategy is we're going to do this integration pattern approach. We're going to group the applications as such, and we're going to plow through them. Now, obviously, you have to take then the strategy and turn it into the project plan and start to execute it. I'd also say your IAM strategy is going to be many things. So we picked one example there, which is how do you get your applications onto these integration patterns for authentication? But you're also going to have privilege access management. You're going to have other areas of IAM. They also become part of your strategy. And really a strategy is going to look at, from a top-down view, how well is your IAM program currently running? Is it meeting your needs? And if not, then what do you need to do to get it to meet your needs? The answer is almost always no, right? There's always something more that you want out of your program. And so that's what your strategy ought to, identify and put together a high-level plan to take that on. The other thing I wanted to say is the difference between a strategy and a project plan. Your project plan should be updated every day. So every day or let's say no less than every week. Every week you're making progress on tasks. You're, putting in effort. You're consuming hours that were dedicated to, doing those integration patterns or whatever. You need to update that. It's also a project plan is like a form of accounting. You should not be updating your strategy every week. Your strategy is, you're going to set it, and it does need to be updated, but maybe it's a couple times a year, once a year. You're going back and making sure, does this still serve us? Does this still make sense? If not, we adjust the strategy, but we're not updating it every day.
Yeah, if you're updating your strategy even several times a year, I can't imagine what the downstream effects of that look like. And I can't imagine that it's going to be a very agile or easily managed IAM program. I would certainly try to think about it at more of that macro level. It's like, okay, if we're not sure, maybe you don't need to make a decision on it right now, right? If there's something maybe changing the business, hey, we're going to change our HR system, and we're trying to integrate an IGA platform, maybe it's not the right time to integrate an IGA platform. Wait until the HR transition is done. If it's, in a reasonable time frame and it doesn't impact any other things that are coming along. I think you just got to be careful. And I think this is some of the art that goes into, developing an IAM strategy is when do you get into the details and when do you not need to get into the details, and coming up with the right overarching strategy. Sometimes you don't need the details. Sometimes you do. The only way you know which one you need is having conversations with the key stakeholders and really kind of understanding what's important, and you leveraging either experience or knowledge or whatever it might be to say, okay, yeah, that's cool. We know you have 300 apps, but let's focus on the 5 that matter. Right. I don't think anybody, no one's going to come after us if we don't have, Zoom integrated, with a single sign-on solution right away. I don't think that's maybe high risk, or maybe it is depending on the business, but maybe we should be more focused on SAP or, Active Directory or SharePoint or something else maybe that has, either more visibility or maybe more risk to the organization, those sorts of things. The cafeteria menu can wait from a priority standpoint.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what you said there in terms of making changes to that strategy. I think you do need to update your tactics. So if you find your tactics are not working, there's something wrong with the integration pattern. That's okay. Maybe you need to make some edits to the integration pattern, and you don't need to really communicate that information. But if your story keeps changing in terms of your strategy and what's important, how you're prioritizing, what the major issues you're trying to address are, your audience, the people that you have to sell your vision to and you have to get buy-in from, your colleagues across the business, they're going to think you're a fool, right? They're going to think it's like you keep changing your story every month or every 2 months. We come in here and you're telling us IAM is about something totally different. So I think that, I talked to one of our clients about this, which is that, I'm not sure what your career objectives are, but I think building an IAM program is a great career opportunity for somebody because it shows how to create a program within the organization. And to me, like that's like a great opportunity to, or there's so many programs within the organization and they become very important to the success of an organization. And if you become that person who knows how to create a program, get buy-in, communicate strategy, you're going to be a very valuable asset to your organization.
Experienced IAM program managers are worth it. Being able to manage a program and having done it in the past, I see so many programs with inexperienced people running them. And does it get better over time? Yes, but there's growing pains come with it. So if you have the opportunity to come into it and learn quickly, or lean on prior experiences, because it's not just identity. There's plenty of programs out there in the IT world or even, non-IT world. There are lessons learned there. Identity is just another version probably of something that's similar. Be smart with it. Take reasonable, but, calculated measures when you're developing the strategy. There's sometimes going to be risks, plan for the worst, hope for the best, all that good stuff. But, yeah, I'm a big fan of a good IAM program manager. Makes all the difference for an organization's IAM program itself.
Yeah. And I think another key is it's better to over communicate than under communicate. And to the extent possible, keeping your message on point and consistent. And I think that's what this gets to, right? Again, tactics have to be able to change on the fly. Strategy really shouldn't be changing on the fly or really that often. And if you have a strategy and it stays consistent, communicate how your activities align to the strategy, then that's one of the keys to, or one of the ingredients of a successful IAM recipe or IAM program.
It's okay to get smarter. That's the way that I look at it. Got to be agile. All All right. I know we're running short on time. This is a little bit shorter episode this week, but we are happy to take questions like this that we get from our listeners. It's always great to hear from folks who are deriving some value out of these ranting and ravings of identity lunatics every week, as Jim and I are. And hopefully folks got some out of that. Matt, hopefully that answered your question. If not, ping me again on LinkedIn. I'm happy to re-engage and make sure you've got what you need to hopefully go forth and conquer your identity and access management thing, whatever that is. Before we wrap things up, Jim, any final words of wisdom that we want to put out there into the metaverse?
Well, we're still doing the live streaming. For folks who aren't able to attend the live stream in real time, it's available at IDAC Live, which is basically, or idaclive.com.
No, which IDAC.live.
All right. Yes, that's correct. This is being recorded, so you could just dub that out.
I'm going to absolutely leave this in here, and I will actually make it my ringtone every time you text me or something like that.
Yeah, there you go. So anyway, IDAC.live is where we are on the YouTube verse, and you can watch all the past episodes. Plus, if you found this episode, then you must know how to use your podcasting app.
Yeah, definitely. On the web, identityatthecenter.com or idacpodcast.com. We're on Twitter at idacpodcast. As Jim mentioned, we're on YouTube, idac.live. Tons of identity content out there. Some of it helpful. Let's say 100%. Hopefully helpful, hopefully entertaining at the same time. And with that, we'll go ahead and close it out for this week. Thanks, everyone, for watching and or listening. And we'll talk with you all in the next one. Thanks for listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and visit us on the web at identityatthecenter.com.